Welcome to another edition of the Linked Parishes Podcast. I'm Donald McCorkindale, Church of Scotland minister in the parishes of Acharachill and Ardnamurchan, linked with Ardgour, Morvern and Strontian, bringing you news from these parishes and beyond. Recording this on Friday the 20th of March 2026. Yesterday, Thursday evening, I was up at Treeslake Village Hall for one of our very informal Treeslake gatherings for coffee, cake and conversation. And we were talking about, what makes life good. We were having a look at the book of Proverbs, lots of wonderful little bits of wisdom, good advice for living. And we were talking about the things that make life good. Just being out for a walk in nature, noticing the sights, the smells, the sounds, the birdsong. We were also thinking about the time that we spend on our phones and devices. Pot calling kettle black. I've certainly been being intentional recently about not taking too much time on Facebook. I'm actually wondering if the Facebook group is actually serving the church well at all. There seem to be so many adverts and diversions and distractions. So do let me know, is it helpful having the Facebook group for the church there? Lots of things going on. Of course, we're coming up towards Holy Week and Easter. The updated list of what's happening then is now making its way towards Jehadal, which will be out at the beginning of April. Holy Week, of course, begins in March, Palm Sunday, the 29th. And the 29th will be the last Sunday of March. And so what else happens? What have you to remember? You have to remember and put the clocks forward and our spring forward. But on the 29th, being the fifth Sunday of the month, it'll be a joint service for Ardgour, Morvern and Strontian at Ardgour Church at the later time of 11 o'clock. It'll feel like 10 o'clock, but 11 o'clock on the 29th, that's 11 o'clock British summer time. The tea and scones down at Ardnamurchan on Wednesdays fortnightly. Time will also change as we move into April. So next Wednesday, the 25th, there will be tea and scones at 10:30 until 12:30. But then once we're into April, it'll be in the afternoon 2 until 4. Wednesday evening prayers continues every Wednesday, 10 o'clock. And this coming Wednesday, the 25th of March, will mark the 6th anniversary of WEP, Wednesday evening prayers. I don't think I ever imagined when we moved into that first lockdown and we're doing things online. I never imagined that 6 years on, it would still be such an important part of what we do as the Peninsula churches. And many have heard me say that sometimes, some weeks, it can be the largest of the congregations. And it's good to be able to do different things, engaging in different ways at different times. Wednesday evening prayers every Wednesday on the church YouTube channel. I'd mentioned last week on the podcast that I was hoping to be able to firm up some arrangements for a concert, a music concert with a little 5-piece band, Turn, bringing some music, bringing together Scottish traditional, meeting some Scandinavian vibe. And that's going to be on the 25th of April, Saturday the 25th and there'll be some more information in the description, and details about how to get tickets will be available very soon. 25th of April for that. The week prior to that, over the Saturday, Sunday, the 18th and 19th of April, Dualcast, the local heritage group that have now taken over the ownership of Strontian Church, have an exhibition there. I think that's 12 until 4 each afternoon. Sunday coming, the 22nd of March, I'll be at Ardgour and Strontian. Duncan McPherson will be leading worship at Ardnamurchan at 11 o'clock. And there'll be the online worship on Zoom, online worship with communion. And if you haven't got the Zoom link and would like to share in that, do please be in touch. Now, earlier this week, I was down at Kilmaloo at the retreat centre and was delighted to catch up with John Marshall, who has been doing some work there over the last 3 months, taking a sabbatical from his work. And so let's catch up with that conversation. Today, I'm delighted to welcome as our guest John Marshall, who has been at the Kilmaloo Centre for the last 3 months. Welcome to you, John.
Thank you, Donald. Thank you.
Great to have you with us. But before we talk about your time here at Kilmaloo, we're recording this in the beautiful chapel down at the Kilmaloo Centre. Tell us a wee bit about where you came from, what you had been up to before arriving for a spell at Kilmaloo.
So home for me is Abingdon in Oxfordshire, which for some people will be known, if they're into their classic cars, as the home of the MGB, and it used to be the home of the MG car factory. I've lived in that town for over 20 years now. And I work for a company, a small electronics company that makes small radars. And during the recent years, I've been increasingly challenged in my own mindset that I'm working for a company that is very much focused on making money, and that hasn't sat desperately comfortably with me. So actually last year, in the middle of the year, I came up to Kilmaloo for a retreat for my own well-being and a chance to rest, relax, and to restore in some senses. And it was after that retreat I'd shared some things with Steve, who runs the retreat centre here at Kilmaloo, about where my thoughts were. And then later on in the summer, he made contact with me and inquired whether I'd be interested in taking a sabbatical from my work to spend some time at the retreat centre, joining the team. And I was with a friend when I received his message, and then they could see from the change of expression on my face that the message I'd received wasn't just a general how are you doing, how's your day kind of message, and it took me very much by surprise and shock. Surprisingly, though, didn't take a lot of thinking about that it was the right thing for me to do. And so the invite came, and then so I came up to Kilmaloo at the very start of January, and I'll be volunteering as part of the staff team until Easter.
Right, fantastic. So quite a step away from your work for 3 months. Was that fairly easy in practical terms and everything else?
Very remarkably, yes. I started the conversation with there's a lady at work who looks after people's employment and the terms and the paperwork side of things. And she had been aware of me going on a retreat earlier in the year, and I think that topic had intrigued her. And so it was a straightforward conversation. And then with my direct line manager, when we then mooted the idea, the reaction was that sounds a really healthy thing to do. It opened up some really interesting conversations with other colleagues. I think particularly because I was going away to do something particular during a sabbatical, rather than travelling or holidaying or purely serving myself. And I've had some really interesting conversations with my other colleagues in the workplace just prior to leaving about looking after ourselves, our own well-being. Some of those conversations have had a spiritual element and some haven't. But the opportunities that coming brought up in conversation was
we often
wonderful.
talk about sick leave, but we maybe need to make time for wellness leave as well. Fantastic. Tell us some of the highlights of the last almost 3 months as you sort of reach the end of your time here.
So there are many. I think that one of the things that I have really valued doing while I've been here at Kilmaloo is being practical. I've been using my hands, I've been using my body to achieve things, and I can look back on almost every single day and say, this was something we practically achieved, something that was completed, that was tidied, that was painted, that was trimmed, was put away, or was constructed. And the way that my brain ticks, that's very satisfying. And I've been incredibly rewarded through working with the guests that have come on retreat here. And something I learned very early on when I was guided by Steve here, who mentioned to me that we shouldn't consider that the work that we do here is to serve the guests or to make the guests comfortable, particularly, but that the real underpinning element should be that we do all of these things, but we do them by way of removing distractions so that God can work, not so that we are fulfilling what we believe are the right expectations, but that we're removing distractions, we're removing things that would cause people's minds to wander, and actually that allows God to work in people and through people while they're finding him here.
Yeah. Would there be an example, a story that you can tell us about where you've seen a glimpse of God at work?
There was one lady who came to visit us at the centre a couple of months ago for what was titled an individually guided retreat. And all of us who work here at the centre had some interactions with that lady over various meals and various sort of crossing places, as it were. But she had also had the opportunity to have plenty of time with her thoughts and with the scenery and with words as well for herself. And what was really telling was in the week after her visit, when a small parcel arrived at Kilmaloo with a letter attached. And the letter had a paragraph written to each of the staff members at the centre. And there were small things added in. There were a couple of books that had related to conversations that had been had over the dinner table. And there were just various small sort of tokens that showed that the interaction had been two-way. And it is my prayer that the interaction had also been very deeply profound with that particular lady, that guest, and God as well in that time. But on a very human level, her reflection on her time by sending this small package to us was incredibly touching.
Yeah, wonderful. The Peninsula churches, you've experienced something of that, particularly at our Ardgour church. As an outsider, coming in and seeing a different expression of church, what would be some of your comments and reflections there? And you can be as brutally honest as you want.
The church in Ardgour has brought me a lot of joy. And the church that I worship at back at home is a church with a church membership, and the decisions of the direction of the church are made through prayerful consideration of the church membership. And I think possibly we had got to a point in the church's life where we had maybe got a little bit out of balance with the amount of time we spend doing church, talking church, and organising church, and living our faith has possibly slipped a little bit lower down the list than it really ought. And that's something we're all addressing back at home. But on my first interaction with the folk, both at the fellowship at Ardgour and on the occasions when I've been to Kingairloch also, it has felt like the administrative, organisational discussion aspects of doing church have been stripped away, and there is just a genuine faith and an openness to one another, and a freedom of expression of worship in really quite different styles in different places. And I think perhaps for me, when I entered both of those places of worship, my preconceived ideas and the architecture of the buildings and the simplicity of the surroundings led me to believe that the worship and the teaching would be very, very formulaic, very structured. And actually, it has spoken to me so clearly while I've been here. The worship has been very real, and the people's faith, both to one another, but also to outreach into the community, has been quite outstanding. And it's just been a real eye-opener for me that stripping away the mechanics of doing church and focusing on being faithful.
Right.
Has
Well,
been
that's encouraging to hear that from you, John. Thank you. You've listened to some of the podcasts in the past. That's also been encouraging to know that there are people listening to them.
That's true. When I first arrived at Kilmaloo, it was mentioned that there were podcasts, and the size of the linked parishes was mentioned, and in our daily prayers at the centre, we have prayed for the various churches in the linked parishes. And when I first arrived here, I felt quite ill-educated and ill-informed, and it was a really helpful way to get a sense of what makes the area tick, and what makes the churches within the peninsula tick, and what makes them effective, and what they're involved in.
Right, yeah. From other conversations with you obviously have an interest in technology and the gadgets and gizmos. How important do you think it is that the church embraces the 21st century technology and does things in different ways?
I think it's very important that the church doesn't alienate people. And I don't think that always means that we need to jump on everything that is new. But I think there is a sense that if the church is running, and by the church I mean the church generally, as opposed to a particular denomination or a particular worshipping fellowship. But if a church is causing people to be distracted or alienated because there are things they aren't doing, then that is an opportunity to get involved and to be involved. But I also think there are some elements of tradition that we need to maintain. And in one of the early services that I was involved with at Kingairloch in January, when I was shortly after I'd arrived here at Kilmaloo, we sang the hymn "Ancient Words," and for me, as a relatively modern hymn, it makes that very, very accurate reflection that our faith is not based on something that's fleeting. It's not based on something that's just happened in the 21st century. And for me, that's that comfortable mixture of acknowledging the heritage and the history, which brings us to having faith today. So in terms of your question about technology, to an extent, as long as it doesn't prove a distraction for those of faith, and certainly my experience at the church in Ardgour is that while the service can be streamed, and while the service can have elements projected, and while we can have amplified voices within the sanctuary, it doesn't come at the cost of a distraction for those who are there, for those for whom that space is sanctuary, that time is worship, and that opportunity is teaching and learning.
Yeah, and that goes back to what you were saying earlier about the retreat context here, that the focus is on removing the distractions in
Very
order
much.
that God gets gets seen, heard. As you know, having listened to some of the past podcasts, we would have some questions. Quick questions, quick answers are in order, but so too are the little tangents that they might take us to. What would be something that you have learned in the last 3 months?
This is an interesting one, Donald, and the answer is leaving things alone. So what I really mean here is particularly the natural world. At my church in Abingdon, in Oxfordshire at home, we have a small garden, and I think it's fair to say we don't leave it alone enough. We mow the lawn, we pick up the leaves. If there are some twigs in the wrong place in the car park, we'll put those aside, and if there's a bit of tree that's fallen, we will chop it and move it away. And yet, when moving slowly and thoughtfully through the grounds here at Kilmaloo, it's really evident that those things aren't actually important. That very often those happenings, the leaves that have fallen, the bough that has been blown off, all of these things can actually just be habitats and can be the natural world working on its own. And human involvement isn't always needed in the natural world. And coming from a town to a much smaller hamlet, that's a lesson that I have learnt.
Thank you. Brilliant. What would be a piece of advice that has always stuck with you?
So this is an interesting one. I had a manager probably about 10 years ago called Paul, and he had a team of 4 in total, and 2 of us were quite new at the same time, and we had some very interesting discussions around how we got on with our work and how we focused on things. The topic that he would use, he would say, "When do you eat your frogs?" And the first time he raised this, we looked at him with quite some sort of puzzled expressions. And he went on to explain, he said, the things that you don't want to do, the things that you can't quite imagine completing, the things that are maybe a bit distasteful. And the answer was straight away. And it's a piece of advice that's always stuck with me, and it plays to the ease with which I can be distracted, particularly in a workplace with lots going on, with lots of screens, lots of people, comings and goings and different projects. I can get distracted easily. Sometimes I can procrastinate, particularly jobs that are a little bit distasteful, or I don't quite know where they're going to go or how to start. And for me, one of the downsides of that is sometimes I can end up staying up quite late just because I want to see things completed. So the piece of advice, eat your frogs straight away.
Brilliant. Yeah, I can certainly resonate with those thoughts. There are always things that can be put off until the day after tomorrow. When you mentioned the frog image, another thought that comes to mind is this question. There are 5 frogs sitting on a wall. 2 of them decide to jump off. How many frogs are on the wall?
Now, I'm taking my time to answer this because the answer seems very obvious, which makes me think it possibly isn't. But if there were 5 and 2 jumped off, in my mind, that does leave 3 frogs on the wall, Donald.
Well, what I said was there are 5 frogs sitting on a wall and 2 of them decide to jump off. I didn't say they'd committed to the action.
Oh, that is very good indeed. Yes, I should listen more carefully, and maybe that's a lesson I should be taking, to listen more carefully.
Yeah, there are always things that there are good decisions to do, but until you've actually done them. Let's move on. Tell us who inspires you.
There's an author that I think I would say as an answer to this question, and it's Henri Nouwen, who I was aware of as an author for some years, but hadn't really got into his writing for a while. And when I read his written word, one of the great attractions to his writing style is that he doesn't gloss over his own very human struggles and pains. And there's no sense of him being set apart from his readers. Through that style and the way that he exposes his own vulnerabilities, I can really appreciate that, and I can interpret and read his word much more valuably as a result of understanding his own challenges.
Yeah. I've read some of his stuff during my training, The Wounded Healer and others, Letter of Consolation. But yeah, he's someone that, every now and again quotes from Henri Now and pop up. Yes, an inspiring character. What would be a hymn or a song that lifts you up, John?
If I'm allowed, I don't know whether this is really like Desert Island Discs or not, but if I might be allowed to. So the first one...
I'm not sure anyone has ever answered this question with one.
So the first song would be the setting by Howard Goodall of Psalm 23. Now, by describing it that way, some people might think that I'm quite a musician, which is not the case. And the setting by Howard Goodall is, in fact, the theme tune for The Vicar of Dibley. Mm-hmm. And there's one particular reason why this setting of Psalm 23 has great meaning to me. So I do sing in a community choir at home. It is one that doesn't have auditions, just for the record. And the choir leader, who doesn't particularly profess a faith at all, she chose this psalm for us to sing in our community choir. And when she introduced us to the music, she actually wanted us to read the words. And this lady who doesn't profess a faith, she caused us to pause, to stop, and to think about the promises that are given through that psalm. And I think for me, somehow that had more of a profound impact than someone giving me the same message from a pulpit in a church, because I could see already the psalm had spoken outside of what we might call its natural habitat. And then this lady was sharing it again with a wider group. And the power and the meaning were not lost in all the times we rehearsed it. And the choir leader did ask us to contemplate the meaning as we sang, using intonation and volume to emphasise the various promises that come later on in that psalm. And that's always stuck with me, how the psalm had worked through her back to me and the others in the choir.
Thank you.
Now the second, if I might, is again, it's a particular recording. And at my home church, we have chairs within the sanctuary, and the sanctuary is used for a variety of groups during the week. And this does mean the chairs are in and out like yo-yos sometimes. And if I'm working in the sanctuary, putting the chairs in and out, sometimes I will play How Great Thou Art, particularly the version recorded by Maranatha Music. Now, it may be possible to add a link, I'm not sure, Donald, but that particular recording has a certain pace and quite a beat to it. And it's uplifting, it's joyful, and it does genuinely mean the chairs get put out very effectively and very quickly. And it makes me happy. It fills me with joy as I'm doing what many in the world would consider a menial task. But that's a particular hymn that I enjoy playing while I'm laying out chairs.
Thank you. Tell me about a place that is of special significance for you, a meaningful place that you enjoy being.
So I'm not answering this question just to seek the approval of your Scottish audience. And it will possibly come as a surprise. But the place is Invergordon, which isn't known for its affluence, which is known for some of the industrial works that happen on the water's edge there. About 13 years ago, I went up to Invergordon to work for a week. And at that time, I was travelling a lot, more than I probably care to admit, really, with my job. And my travels took me to different continents, to different cultures, to different weather conditions. And I had been in and out of Aberdeen a lot of times with that job. And then this particular day, I travelled up with a colleague called Marcus to Inverness. And we were due to be at Invergordon to work later in the day. And so we stopped off, we got ourselves some picnic food. We had a car to drive from Inverness to Invergordon. We travelled, we stopped at the side of the road, we had a little light lunch, and then we moved on and we got on with our work. The work went smoothly, and it was during the course of that week in Invergordon that I just felt to myself, this is an area of the world I could come to again. I think I perhaps shocked myself and my colleagues when I said it quite so definitively, because it wasn't just, oh, maybe I could come again, but there was a real sense of, I could come here again. And for all of the places around the world that work at that time was taking me, somewhere within the own landmass that I live, somewhere at some times of the year with shorter days than where I live, with colder weather than where I live, it didn't have all of the sort of tourist trappings that some of the workplaces we had been to, certainly in Africa and Asia, had. There was just something about the scenery surrounding the workplace and the warmth of welcome. It might be that was one particular job where we stayed in a small family-run bed and breakfast for the nights we were there, and there was just a genuine welcome. I felt much more peaceful. Even though we were doing technical work while we were there, there was a real sense of peace that came, and that has always stuck with me. As it shocked me at the time, and it's still affirmed.
And you've been back since?
I haven't. No, I haven't been back, but I do know that while I'm at Kilmaloo, I'm closer than I am when I'm at home. So maybe it's a trip I should make at some point.
Thank you, John. Tell me, what are your hopes for, now I was going to say the church in Scotland, you might want to extend it to the UK as you think of returning to Oxford, but what would be your hopes for the church here?
So my hope for the church, and I think I'm probably reflecting quite strongly on my experience of the worshipping communities within the Peninsula here, but interaction between the church and community activities as a way of staying relevant. And I can see that is happening already. For me, it's also can happen alongside an appropriate and potentially gradual migration away from frameworks that might alienate and confuse folk who don't have a church background, but that sort of crossing over between church and community, for me, is a way of sharing the promise that we have as Christians. And something that's really excited me while I've been here, and I think I touched on it earlier when we were speaking, Donald, is to see that this is actually already happening in the Peninsula. And in just 2 months, to have heard the Kilhoan pantomime described as church meets pub, to have encountered the music events at Ardgar, and at my first winter supper that I went to, ending up in conversation with someone I hadn't met before about praying for our offspring. And all of these things have just reminded me that these tight-knit Highland community life does create many, many opportunities, and some folk might refer to these as crossing places. And I think the responsibility lies with all of us to be genuine ambassadors for Christ in these crossing places. And the quotation comes to mind now. It was once attributed to St. Francis, but I did check on my computer last night, and apparently there's no real sort of backbone to support this claim. But the quotation: "Preach the gospel at all times. Use words when necessary seems really relevant to the mission of the church, particularly in this part of the world where the relationships exist. There are various crossing points between church and community, and that responsibility to preach, sometimes with words, is on all of us.
Thank you very much indeed. Final question we'll ask you about a favourite verse and we'll maybe comment on that. But is there anything else that you're wanting to share with us before we wrap up?
That's quite a direct question. I hadn't prepared for this one. In terms of something to share, I would just want to acknowledge how welcome I have been made to feel in this part of the world. And I'm aware that coming with my accent from down south and my funny towny ways and all the rest of it, that there was no reason why I should be instantly welcomed into the fold. But across the board, secular and faith-based, I have just felt a sense of welcome into the communities that I've interacted with. I think all of those for whom this part of the world is home should take a pride in that attitude, because it is very godly, it is very lovely. It has allowed me to get the very best of my time here, both in terms of my health, but also in terms of my spiritual well-being as well. And that welcome from everyone, from the staff on the ferry, to the people in the pub, to the folk that I've met at church and on the road, has just been fantastic, particularly when I am the incomer and I have encroached into your space, and I've been welcomed, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, John. John, is there a verse from Scripture that we can finish off with, a favourite verse that you always hold with you?
So yes, there is a verse that I have, and when you say hold with me, very, very tangibly, there is a verse that I have with me where I'm staying here, written in beautiful calligraphy by my 18-year-old daughter. It's from Jeremiah 29, verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. While I'm here at Kilmaloo, I've been spending some time with gathering my own thoughts as to how I use my efforts, my energies, and my influence, and that is ongoing. In fact, I'm starting a retreat as a guest on the other side of the fence, as it were, here at Kilmaloo. And the title of that retreat is What Next, Lord? And I'm hoping through that to start sowing the seeds of understanding as to what it is that I might be being called to next in life. And that verse from Jeremiah is that reassurance that there is a plan, and it is up to me to listen and provide the opportunities to hear, to understand and then follow.
Thank you very much, John. Have a good week on retreat and enjoy the last few weeks here in Kilmaloo, and for all that awaits you in the future. Thank you for your time, for your encouragement today.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. It was great to meet up with you. And next week on the podcast, we'll be hearing from Steve Aisthorpe, the leader at the Kilmaloo Retreat Centre. Thank you. Thank you for listening, for engaging with the Linked Parishes podcast. For information about all that's happening around the Peninsula churches, do check out www.peninsulachurches.org.uk. God bless you all.